Hey everyone, Karen and I are here, and today we're going to tackle a topic that I don't think a lot of people talk about a lot, which is leadership regret. And this came up as I was chatting with a client who's just still struggling with what she calls mistakes from several years ago, her trying to help her team to be successful, and they listened, I think, maybe, and they weren't as successful as she thought. And that was still holding her back from building her team. And I realized that in a lot of my coaching on recruiting, that holds a lot of people back. And I wanted to bring Karen on because we are actually different. Karen, do you suffer from leadership regret?
I don't.
Yeah, that sucks because you're like the exception. And I do suffer, or did suffer, from a lot of leadership regret. And I know that's stuff that you've helped me to overcome. So I wanted to invite you as our guest expert on overcoming regret. And I know that's a thing. Why don't you have regret?
Well, I've definitely made mistakes in leadership. And I think that kind of what you and I were talking about a little bit before we started recording is that it really depends on what definition of success we have for leadership when we take on a leadership role. And I went into leadership, however many years ago it was. My first leadership role was probably like 14 years ago or so. But I went into it feeling like I knew nothing and knowing that I was going to make a lot of mistakes. And so I really just expected to make mistakes along the way. And much kind of the way that I think about it is when you go into parenting, you go into, well, most of us, I mean, I don't know if there's anyone that goes into parenting feeling like they're not going to make mistakes. I don't know anyone who's gone into parenting thinking they're not going to make mistakes. But for you, you didn't think you were going to make mistakes.
I don't know. No, I read an article that said all the kids go to therapy, even if you're a good parent. And I was like, okay.
So you knew you were going to make mistakes, right?
They were mistakes. They were just going to end up in therapy.
They were going to end up in therapy. Well, I knew I was going to make a lot of mistakes. And so I think of it like that, where it's just having that definition of success that it's okay. So for me, it was just something that I expected to do.
Good. Well, so I have had to deal with a lot of leadership regret, not being as enlightened. Because for me, I want to go in and I want to do something right, and I want to do it well the first time, and I take a lot of responsibility for what it is that, telling, like, if you're in a leadership position, I think what I have come to realize is that actually what people want from a leader is not to know everything. I think that's a huge, you're talking about expectation. So you're going in saying you're going to make mistakes. But I think it also comes from this idea that when I'm a leader, I'm supposed to know everything. Like that leadership and knowledge are the same thing. Do you think they're the same thing, or do you think they're different? What do you think?
Leadership and knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Like that you need your leaders to know what to do all the time and be right all the time.
No, I don't think. And I think that's actually where most leaders get it wrong. I mean, not that you got it wrong, but that's been the source of a lot of your leadership regret, right? Is feeling like, and presenting in the way of, okay, like I'm the one that they're going to look to for all of the answers. And for me, because I knew I didn't know anything, or at least thought I didn't know anything, my messaging was always, I'm going to walk alongside you. Like, I don't know, but I'll do my best to help you figure it out. And so that is something where I think we have to, if we have a definition of success, that being a leader means we have to know everything, we really have to redefine that definition of success, because we're setting ourselves up for failure. And then we're also then putting ourselves in a position to take responsibility if our team members fail.
Correct. All of those things are true.
Right.
You could just tell them my mistakes. You don't have to hold back. I mean, well, maybe a little bit. I don't know. Yeah, well, that's definitely been it. Well, I think you think when you look at your business in terms of it's a hierarchy, right? Upline, downline, or boss, employee, you feel this pressure, right? As the leader to say, well, I don't know, I guess I'm above you, so I should know more than you, and I should be able to do all this. But the problem is that word is should. So you might know stuff, but I think what I've realized, or what you've helped me realize, is that no one has that much power over someone else's success or a lack of success, which is comforting and also upsetting at the same time. Like, you kind of want that power to be able to say, I am so good and amazing that I can make anyone successful.
Yeah.
But then the flip side of that same belief is, if you're not successful, then I wasn't good enough or smart enough. And I think for me, I didn't realize how dangerous that thought process was. And, shifting that to the role of the leader, according to what Gallup's done all the research, right? They don't want someone who knows it all. I think it actually harms your leadership if you always come across as you know it all, right? Because then you're like a know-it-all. Are you frozen? Yeah, a little bit.
I am.
Yeah, if you could come across as a know-it-all. So they say trust, compassion, stability, and hope. And when you look at your Gallup profile, right, you have the way you do that, and then you can step into that and develop and grow your skills. So let's say I came to you in a mopey meltdown. It's totally hypothetical.
That would never happen.
Right. And then you said, what's wrong? And I said, nothing. I'm fine. I just want to work on whatever we need to work on. Right. So that's the first step to understanding when you're not fine, is when you think you're fine. So let's say I made a decision that was wrong. What kind of questions would you ask to help someone sort through and okay, let me actually back up. So the problem with the leadership regret that we're working with for our clients specifically is they have these regrets on things that happened in the past, and that's actually stopping them from moving forward. So now they don't want to make sales anymore because of some mistake they maybe made with a customer. They don't want to recruit anymore or coach team members because of some regret that they have in the past. So what kind of questions would you ask to help someone move forward?
I would probably start by asking, what did you learn? So, thinking through the mistakes that you made, what is it that you learned from those mistakes? And just then reminding them that no learning can happen without mistakes. My little sister is a teacher, a second grade teacher, and I love one of the messages that she gives to her students at the beginning of the year. And this is something that I do with my kids now, just all the time, is let them know that no learning can happen without mistakes. So mistakes are part of learning. And when we learn, we make mistakes. So mistakes are actually good, because if we're only ever doing things that we know how to do, we're not growing, we're not getting better, we're not learning new things. And so just once again, really, first of all, asking, what lessons did you learn? And then really asking them, what's your definition of a leader? And then helping them redefine what being a leader means.
Yeah. You say you use that all the time with your kids. I feel like you use that with me too.
You're a kid.
I'm proud of your kids. That's true. What's your definition of a leader? I also I don't like it, but is that true and what's true?
Yeah.
I'm sure anyone who's listening to this and watching this would be shocked to hear that when the camera's not on, I tend to be, you call it dramatic? Dramatic, a little bit. And what would I say? I would say like,
I'm the worst leader ever in the world.
I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm a total fraud. So then what would you say? What questions would you ask?
Oh, okay. I say what I do say to you is that really true?
What you do say on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays.
Is that true?
Is that true? No. And then you say, what's true? And these are questions that we can stop and ask ourselves all the time. Another really annoying thing you made me do. Think twice, by the way, when you hire someone full-time who has a master's in counseling. Yeah, I don't think you'll remember this either. You made me spend a whole weekend writing down all my fears. Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
What? That we were friends.
I know, the meanest.
Why do you think that's such a valuable exercise?
Because if we don't actually define the fear or the problem, we can't figure out how to move forward. And so when we're stuck and spinning, it's because of the thoughts that we have, the things that we're thinking. I mean, a fear is just a thought, right? And if we don't actually define what's happening in the background, we don't know how to move forward. And I think too, just writing it down, I would ask you the question, like how you're asking me, why do I think that was such a useful exercise? Well, I'm not the one who did it.
And you said, I can't believe you did that.
I know, I was like, I can't believe you actually did that. Well, what was helpful for you about that? Now, I would say these are things I do I do this sort of work on myself.
Well, yes, I know that.
Yeah.
You also do it. I'll just call it to me, not with me.
Yes.
It feels combative most of the time. Well, I mean, first I had a few choice words. And then what I realized was, so I've been in leadership since I was 20. So July 5th, I think this is funny. You'll think this is funny. I will have been in sales exactly half of my life. I calculated it. I know that's nerdy, right? On that specific day. Don't laugh. Okay, so anyway, since I was 20 is when I started in sales leadership. But I was always in massive action. It was massive action to massive action to massive action. And so in order to cope in that environment, right? So if I started working in my manager's office at the time, I would do stuff, make mistakes, and it was fine because you have this person here who's like, it's okay. You're learning. Let's talk about it. Let's reflect. And then you go out on your own as a leader. And then you screw up. And then there's nobody there who's saying, right? They're just like, that you're telling or you're talking to, and they're saying, it's okay, that's normal, me too. Mm-hmm. I experienced that as well. And so it's like, oh crap, I made a huge mistake. Okay, let's just shove that down into a compartment because I have to show up to work again tomorrow. Yeah. And then again, and then again, and then you make a few more and you're just like shoving them. And then I stopped in my cut office and then applied for a job and got one right away. So now I'm in a new job, learning new things. So it's all just down there. There's just never been a moment where it even made sense, where it came up again, but it was just kind of always there. Yeah. Until it became a little bit crazy. It all welled up, right? Over however many years. And I think that it was like just having this gaping wound all the time. Yeah. And not to be gross, but it was just like a gross wound that wasn't like gushing to the point where it was, you could see it, but it was still slowing me down. And I think it was just shoving it down and running from it. But then when you actually turn around and you look at it, you're like, oh, that's not even that bad.
Yeah.
I think when I got down to it, it was like, if I'm not successful, then I'll get sick again. And then like Charlie will divorce me. It was like so weird and convoluted when it finally all sorted out, which was just not even going to happen because my college boyfriend, right, was like, you're too engrossed in whatever it is that you're doing. This is not fun anymore. And I was like, that's what that was. That's so dumb.
Yeah.
But I never dealt with it because I was always in action. And I think a lot of our leaders that we work with, they're always in action. So they take that mistake and they're like, that really hurt and that really stunk. And instead of taking the time to say, what did I learn from it? And how is this useful to the team that I have? Or how is this useful in leadership? You just shove it deep down and just stay in action until it just becomes so much that it's almost like a weight around your ankle.
Yeah. 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 And I think it's important to shine. It's kind of like those monsters under the bed, right? We have to shine the light on them. And so just being willing to do that and seeing what's really underneath.
Talking about your feelings. So annoying.
So hard.
It's so awkward. Awesome. I think one other thing that I want to share with anyone who's listening is that over the past few years, I've really made a point to try to hear the stories of successful entrepreneurs and look for the pattern so that I didn't have to be wrong. Well, guess what pattern I found? Every successful entrepreneur, the only pattern I could find was that they bounced back from a debilitating failure, one that should have left them for dead, that would have, for a normal person, they would have just given up. Every single leader that I have that talks about these times where they had to move forward and create a new story. And so when I started to realize that pattern, I actually started to look at these big pieces of regret, almost like the scar, like the battle wounds that all the successful people have. Kind of like how I tell my kids that my stretch marks are tiger stripes.
I love that.
And I remember when the kids were little, I think Zoe was sad that she didn't have skin on her tummy that was hanging over. It was really funny. She's like, I don't even have a tum-tum like you do. And I said, don't worry, someday you'll have kids and you'll have one too. Okay, I'm so glad. Like, she felt bad that she didn't have the scars, right? And I just thought that was such an interesting lesson that every single successful person has these stories. And when I stopped looking at it as this is a reason I'm not going to be successful, and I look at it as a rite of passage, I remember talking to my uncle, I'm sure you remember this, and I was like, oh, I lost $100,000 or I lost $200,000. He's like, that's it?
Yeah.
He's like, oh, my first 3 years, I lost $1 million. And, he's super successful today. And that, and when you start to read the Zappos story and the Nike story and all these stories, they all have stories like that. And I realize that it just makes us more qualified. So those are my thoughts. Now, I mean, I wouldn't have been able to speak about this 4 years ago, though.
Right.
Any other thoughts of encouragement for our people?
I mean, it's not being ashamed. So really, again, recapping, it's really redefining what does being a leader mean? What does success look like? And also, I think something that is important moving forward, we can't go back and change, but really looking back at the lessons that were learned, but also putting a plan in place for failure moving forward. So thinking about, okay, so I'm going to expect to make mistakes, and the next mistake I make, how can I plan for that? How can I plan for how I'm going to handle that? Because that's part of what you're talking about with bouncing back and being resilient, is really having a plan of, all right, so I'm going to fail. I know the mistakes are going to happen. And then what's my plan when I feel really crappy about that failure? What am I going to do to help myself bounce back?
That's good. So like not to be surprised when it happens again. What? I thought I learned all my lessons.
Yeah, and plan for it. I was listening to a podcast the other day where she talked about when she coaches people, she's like, okay, so next week I want you to come with a really big failure every week. She's like, your job is to go fail this week at something, because if you're not coming to this coaching call with a really big failure, then you're not putting yourself out there enough. I thought that was really awesome.
Is that Jody?
No, that's Brooke Castillo with the Life Coaching School.
So my friend, for those of you listening, one of my friends is Jody Moore. And when I started my coaching business, she told me that my job was she said, call me next week with 3 failures, please. And she made me put on my whiteboard, track all your failures. And every week I would call her, or we would talk, because she was maybe 6 months into starting her coaching business when I quit my job. We were really around the same time. And so I was helping her with tech, and she was doing this to me.
Yeah.
Life coach. And she made me write down all my failures on the whiteboard. And so I would write them down, and I would call her. I was like, I got one, right? Because I have to win. And I said, my webinar completely couldn't log in. I kicked everyone out. And she's like, that's not a failure. That was a tech problem. Try again. And we played this game for weeks and weeks and weeks until, in essence, I gave up because I could never win the game.
Yeah.
Because her point was that what we think of as fail. So first I was, afraid of failing. So I'm going to try to fail. So it's a goal. Okay, great. But then every single time, okay, the ads didn't work. I failed. Did you fail, or did the ads not work? Okay, fine. Right? I had a client that wasn't successful. I failed. Did you fail? Or did the client? I'm like, And then finally I gave up because and realized through that, I have lots of really annoying friends, first of all. But second, I realized that failure is just a construct.
Yeah.
That maybe it's not even something that's real.
Yeah, I love that.
So now we know where she got it from. All right, thanks everyone for listening and living for a few minutes in our world. Say bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.